Great. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here um, at the Center for Crime Victim Services annual meeting. My name is Bob Paolini. I'm the chair of the board, the Victims Compensation Board. Um, I just have a couple of comments to just sort of open this meeting, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jen because it's her and her staff that carry out the really fabulous work that the center does. Um, just a little bit of history, and then I'm going to ask the other board members that are here to sort of introduce themselves. Um, the Victims Compensation Board, which we serve on, is a five-member board. It was created by statute in 1989. Um, the statute, the five members are appointed by the governor. Um, and the statute says that the membership is made, three of the five seats on the board are sort of specialty seats. The statute says that a physician licensed to practice in the state should be one of the seats. An attorney admitted to practice in Vermont should be one of the seats, and an individual who is a crime victim should be a seat on the board plus two others. Um, so I'm an attorney. Uh, Richard Katzman is Dr. Katzman. Susan, I still don't see that she's here, but hopefully she will be in a couple of seconds. So what is the function of the board? Um, we work with the center to coordinate the victims comp program, the restitution program, and really any programs in the state that work to protect and help victims of crime. 2 years after the board was created, the legislature created the Center for Crime Victim Services. And that's the group that really, as I said earlier, does the work that needs doing in this state. And you're going to hear about that from all the folks here today. And there's the statutory language on the screen as to what the center does. And I'm not going to speak for the center because I'm the board member and Jennifer Pullman is the person that actually carries out that work through her staff. So that was 1991. In 2003, the legislature created the restitution unit and put the restitution unit and the center all sort of under the auspices of the Victims Compensation Board. So that's how we got here. So I see a couple of board members on the screen. And of course, when you look at a Zoom screen, we can be anywhere. But I'm looking at the upper left and I see Sue there. And you've unmuted, Sue. Do you want to just sort of introduce yourself?
I believe I am unmuted.
You are.
And I'm one of the other. I'm a retired victim advocate. If a victim advocate ever retires, I worked for the state's attorney's office for 35 years, 25 years as a victim advocate. And I really enjoy being on the board for victims.
Thank you. Alicia, I see you on the top right.
Hi, I'm Alicia Post. I'm also an other. I am the co-director of outpatient mental health and substance use disorder treatment at Washington County Mental Health Services, and I am honored to share this this duty with you fine folks. Thanks.
Dick, thanks.
Hi, I'm Dick Katzman. I'm a mostly retired family doctor. I live in Waterbury, worked here and at Central Vermont Medical Center. Have been the doctor on the board for a number of years, almost a decade, I think, and find it challenging and really quite humbling to try to make decisions on behalf of victims of crime and do it as fairly and as passionately as we can, and sometimes with both limited information and limited resources. So it's It's an honor to be part of this group, as difficult as it can be sometimes.
Thank you. I still don't see Susan Hyde. Maybe she'll join us a little bit later. So at this point, Jennifer, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Bob. And I'm Jennifer Pullman. I'm the director of the Center for Crime Victim Services. And thank you to our board. Thank you to providers, victim survivors, and allies who are joining us today. And just welcome to all to our annual meeting. And before I start with just some brief remarks, I do want to acknowledge again the death of Senator Sears in June of this year. He was a giant in the Senate and a lion when it came to victim services. You know, every time that I approached him, sometimes, you know, we all know, those of us who know Senator Sears knows that sometimes he could be a little bit grumpy, but he would always hear me out and he would always somehow fix it and make things okay. And the thing I really appreciate about it the most, there are two things. One was how responsive he was to his constituents, but most importantly, how respectful he was to victims and survivors, including those who weren't even his constituents. And you will hear from from Kelly Carroll, who is actually in his county as well, but even victim survivors who would write letters from other parts of the state, he would take time out of the committee to read those letters into the record because perhaps he wasn't sure if other people would actually read them if they were just submitted in writing. So his attention, his respect for victim survivor voices was something that I valued. I knew when I recommended a victim survivor to go before him that they would be respected and they would be heard. So turning towards today, this work is very difficult, and it's wonderful to be reminded, as I am today, of the community that we have with each other. And this community is so important because not just of the challenging nature of the work, but because our landscape, the face of victimization and the face of harm is ever changing, always causing us to try and keep up with what feels like less and less in terms of resources and support for our work. The increasingly significant impact of substance misuse, mental health challenges, housing, to just name a few that they have on our community and on the incidence of harm makes this work more difficult than ever before. And the layers of support that are needed present us with increasing challenges for which we're looking for answers and again, looking for resources. So this community that we have, again, that, you know, we don't stop. We show up every day. We work together with very little. And, you know, there's this ever uncertain shadow of funding in the background that presents those of us doing the work with that additional worry. How do I keep the doors open? How do I find people that want to do this challenging work when I can't necessarily promise them a job next year? And, you know, those are real pieces that you'll hear about. The center's, you know, involved in those conversations because we do provide that grant funding, whether it be federal, state grant or grant funding or other a small amount of general fund dollars. And you'll hear that later that, you know, we take this very seriously and, you know, frankly, it just doesn't feel fair because the work is hard. And this is something that people should not have to worry about. But we do continue to figure things out and we move forward and we do address these challenges and we still come to this work and think about different solutions, ones that are more victim-centered and not just criminal justice centered. I think about the growth over the years in terms of restorative options for victims and survivors that really look to meet them where they're at. I think about the growth in legal services options for victims. Back when I started this work a while ago in Vermont, those were not options. And I think about the work that communities are doing and that we're trying our best to support in terms of reaching out to victims and survivors who don't feel safe reporting, who don't feel that they can come forward, And how do we meet those individuals where they're at and provide supports for them as well? So these are some of the challenges that, again, with working in community, that's how you make those limited resources grow. And it's really been an honor to work with each and every subgrantee we have, each and every one of you on this call. And at the end of the day, our passion and commitment will not be daunted. We will still show up, we will still do the work, and we will still figure out a way to get it done. Which brings me to our next speaker, Kelly Carroll. When I think of not being daunted, I think of the person, the mother, the warrior I have come to know over the past couple of years. Sorry.
Hi, Jennifer.
Kelly, Kelly will share her story and her daughter Emily's story with you. Suffice it to say, it has been an honor to have her trust, and I learn from her all the time. She has more courage and strength than she knows. And I know Emily is watching you, Kelly, with love and pride. Thank you to you, Kelly, and thank you to all of you.
Well, thank you. It might take me a minute to get together, but I want to thank you, especially you, Jen. I'm very honored to be asked to speak today, and I don't know where I would be today if it wasn't for Jennifer. So I'm really not sure exactly what to talk about, except under, words of wisdom. And I think the best wisdom I can pass on is to use your voice. I am Emily's voice because I don't want anyone else to go through what we've gone through. I'm sorry. I thought I could do this, Jennifer, without crying, but I apologize.
Take your time.
So-
Take your time, Kelly.
So my name is Kelly Carroll. I am a just about lifetime resident of Bennington, Vermont. I moved here in '69 when I was in kindergarten. And I live on the same street that my parents live on and I grew up on. So I love Vermont, and I raised my family here. And Emily is one of my daughters. I had a set of twin girls. She will be forever 26 for me. Because that's how old she was when she was taken away from us. I didn't know anything about the court system. I didn't even know that there was a Center for Crime Victim Services, and I'm very grateful for that. Our person, our daughter's killer, was actually someone in the system for a long time. Excuse me. He had done an attempted murder in 2018 and had been found not competent and gone into the hospital. And then he was released, and a couple of months later, that's when he had attacked my daughter. And just about 2 months before he attacked her, he had made a video saying that he was a murderer and he could kill anybody because the state couldn't do anything because he was found not competent. So that was Thanksgiving of 2020. And on Martin Luther King's Day in 2021 is the day that we lost Emily. So since that day, we've been going through the court process just about every 90 days or so. I call it the limbo land of trauma. It seems to be just about before every major holiday, every birthday, every milestone. That's when we have to go to court. And it's almost like having a Band-Aid ripped off. I knew nothing about the process. When the officers arrived to tell us about Emily, they told us that the person who had done it, they had caught him at the scene, and that he would most likely not do any jail time, but that probably in a hospital, which isn't exactly true as it turned out to be. But we're still going through the court process. And what I've learned going through that is when you're a victim, you really don't know where to go or who to turn to. So I wrote to Governor Scott and I said I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I just know that I wanted change. And he connected me with then AHS Secretary Mike Smith. And from there, I got connected with Senator Sears. And I just have to echo what Jennifer says about Senator Sears. He is absolutely amazing. Excuse me. Oh. I apologize for being emotional. But Senator Sears had been working on S3 Act, which is now Act 57, which is a right, an act involving competency to stand trial. And that's when I first became involved with Jennifer and the term victim, which I had a really hard time seeing myself as a victim. I really hope I've grown into a victim's advocate over the past couple of years, and that wouldn't have happened without the Crime Victims Center, the Center for Crime Victim Services. When you go into the court system, it's not a victim-friendly system, and for the first 2+ years, whenever we went in, the courts never even mentioned Emily. I had brought, you see the picture in front of you that says, "Remember Emily." I brought that to court. The only time that her name was even mentioned or we were even referred to in court was when I was instructed immediately to put that picture away. I had testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee about that experience. And the next time we went back to court, we had a new judge, and she actually, every time we went, she just acknowledged that Miss Hammond's family was in the courtroom. And it wasn't a lot, but that means a lot. Just that little bit of acknowledgement that there is a victim. Because when you go to court, it's all about the defendant. Nothing about the victim really, really matters. And that's really hard for families to take. We're going to be going back to court in December. We're going to have our third judge, so I'm not really sure how that's going to work out, but I do hope that they do start to be a little bit more victim friendly. So in 2021, when Emily was murdered, I said that he had done an attempted murder in 2018, and the Vermont State Police got there during the act. His victims found out that he was released when they found about when they heard about my daughter's murder on the news. And that just isn't right. So S3 Act 57, sorry, added back in or gave victims the right for notification for whenever there's a change of custody. So we've had a lot of it in our case. Right before Christmas in 2022, he was transferred from the corrections facility to the Berlin Hospital, the psych hospital. Right before Easter in 2023, he was transferred back to the corrections facility because there was a stipulation in the court agreement that he would, if he was no longer eligible for acute care treatment, he would then go either to the Middlesex facility, which they then found out could not give involuntary medication, or they would send him back to jail because he would be deemed competent and they had a hold without bail thing. So that's where he sits today because he's refusing to do his evaluations. He's had 3 no-shows for evaluations. 2 of them were in the morning, and then his attorney finally said he's not a morning person, so now it's in the afternoon. The judicial system, the Vermont judiciary, it's my understanding they're going through a project on how to make the court system easier for defendants, and they haven't really considered victims, and I think they need to because it is every 30 to 60 to 90 days. It's before every birthday, every milestone, every holiday. And the only thing that really matters in the court system is the defendant. So it's time that victims start to matter. I'm very, very grateful for Jennifer and the hard work that she's done because this past session, she was able to advocate and we were able to advocate as well for a victim's rights in court. If you're in a regular criminal court system and you go to trial, victims have an opportunity to have a statement. They actually have the opportunity to read the statement. In mental health cases, we don't. And we just recently got the right to submit a statement. Not that, no guarantee the judge is going to read it, no guarantee that it's going to get considered. But at least now we're able to write something and submit it and hopefully have some type of a voice. Because loss is never easy for anyone, and anyone that deals with grief and loss does it differently. But when you lose a child, it's like losing a part of you, and that part of you is gone. And when you lose a child to murder, you grieve, you learn, and you get angry. You get angry at the killer, you get angry at their accomplices, and you get really angry at the system. But anger doesn't help anyone, and it doesn't get you anywhere. So I think advocating for change, if you're looking for words of wisdom, it would be to use your voice and help make a difference and help just trying to be a change so that somebody else doesn't have to suffer. We try to pay it forward a lot. As Jennifer can tell you, I try to advocate. I'm sure all of the legislators are kind of sick of me, but I do try to write and remind them and personalize it. I'm not an attorney, and I know sometimes I get things mixed up. And that was one of the great things about Senator Sears and Senator Lyons. They always listen. They always, took into consideration, and they get back to victims, and that's really important. Excuse me. But having a voice and advocating for change isn't therapy, but in its own way, it's therapeutic for me. And being Emily's voice helps me with my grief process. But I do want other members of her family and other victims to have that. And I think when you hear about all of the violence in Vermont, there's about 100, from what I'm told, about 100 open murder and attempted murder cases. And you think of the number of victims that go with that. It's not just, like when it took me a little bit to understand with Emily, it's not just me or her siblings or her grandparents and father and stepfather. It was a community grief and loss. Her murder happened in broad daylight on a river path in downtown Bennington. It was Martin Luther King Day. And this other picture on the right is a memorial that's on that Riverwalk path in her memory. And since then, we have done monthly walks. There's a Walloomsac Riverwalk Committee where we take some type of an agency or a nonprofit or somebody who's doing something good in the community, and we highlight them. We give out unsung hero awards once a month to people who just kind of go above and beyond for the community. That award is given out right in front of Emily's memorial. We participate in Socktober in Bennington in Emily's name. This is our 4th year. So far, prior to this month, we collected 5,600 pairs of new socks for homeless shelters, and our goal is another 1,400, so we'll be at 7,000. Just trying to keep her memory alive. And when you take a look at that memorial, all of those decorations for Halloween, those are done by the residents of the Walloomsac apartments that witnessed her murder. So when you talk about victims, there's a lot of victims. Many of them don't know how to have their voices heard, or don't know where to go to, or don't think that their voices matter. So I want to thank all of you for letting us have a voice and for advocating on our behalf, and for all of the hundreds of victims that you help that you don't even realize. So I don't know if those were the words of wisdoms that you were looking for. And again, I do apologize for being all emotional. It's just Um, Sometimes it takes me into my rabbit hole. So I apologize. And questions, or Jen, I don't know how I did on time. I kind of went off script. You're muted.
I don't even know. I was just listening to
I'm
you.
sorry. I'm
No,
so sorry.
No, you stop
Uh,
with the apologies. You're amazing, and it's always inspiring to hear from
okay.
you. And you know, we're gonna do this. Okay, we're just gonna keep fighting.
Well, I have to tell you, I would not be where I am today if it was not for you and your agency. And I want to just tell the people that sit on the board how amazing you are and how they better take care of you, because if not, I will be writing them letters like I do to the legislature and the governor. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you for sharing your story, and thanks for the work that you're doing for victims.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you are the one that is amazing. Holy crap. Thank you for being here. And I know I couldn't do it. So thank you.
Jennifer, I think I'm going to hop off if you don't mind.
Okay, I'll check with you
I'll
later.
check back
Tonight.
with you later. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. All right, and I've lost track of where we are on the agenda, so I'm going to allow victims' compensation to take over. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jen. So my name is Maria Gibbs. I'm one of the victim compensation specialists, and I'll be speaking a little bit about the victim compensation program. Becoming a victim/survivor of crime can be someone's worst day and worst nightmare. Prior to 1990, there was no established statewide resource for victims of crime. For 34 years, the Vermont Victim Compensation Program has been and will continue to be a resource to turn to, a program which can alleviate financial stress and help victim survivors access the urgently needed medical and mental health care that they may need as they work on healing. During fiscal year 2024, our program received feedback from a survivor of sexual assault. She had written, "Thanks for your help, sensitivity, professionalism, and quick work on my case. You provided me and my family with some financial relief among awful odds, and affirmation of the experience I have been through. Please know I am so grateful." Next slide, please. In state fiscal year 2024, the Vermont Victim Compensation Program received 457 new compensation claims and dispersed $416,125.72 on behalf of eligible claimants. The Sexual Assault Program received a total of 219 new claims and dispersed $86,774.92 on behalf of eligible claimants. The Victim Compensation Program maintains a victim-centered and responsive approach to its work with victims. When the crime occurs in Vermont, the Victim Compensation Program provides limited financial assistance to eligible victims and survivors of crime who have experienced an uninsured financial loss as a direct result of the crime. Most of our referrals come from the court-based victim advocates throughout the state, many of which are based in the state's attorney's offices in each county. Each eligible claim has a $10,000 maximum cap for payment of crime-related losses. Eligible expenses include, but are not limited to, medical and dental care, mental health counseling, funeral costs, and lost wages. The program usually doesn't consider property loss or property damage. The Vermont Victim Compensation staff does consist of 1 program manager, 3 full-time claims specialists, 1 part-time sexual assault program specialist, and 1 part-time administrative assistant. Next slide. In state fiscal year 2024, the Vermont Victim Compensation Program processed 762 payments to victims and survivors of crime. 75.98% of these payments that were made went to these top 4 crime categories. That consists of homicide, domestic assault, aggravated assault, and simple assault. As you can see, the compensation program received the highest number of claims from survivors of homicide and survivors of domestic assault. Homicide and domestic assault continue to be 2 of the crime types for which we receive the most applications year after year. This year, the crime type for which we paid the highest amount was homicide. We would like to point out that when someone dies by homicide in Vermont, the Victim Compensation Program can support the surviving immediate family members as defined in statute. That does include the spouse, domestic partner of the deceased. These surviving loved ones each have their own eligible claims and may receive compensation for payment of funeral, burial expenses, travel expenses to and from the funeral, lost wages for time missed from work due to the traumatic loss, counseling, and more. This year, we have received compensation applications that were linked to 23 homicide victims. We received a total of 67 claims from homicide survivors. In terms of domestic assault, the crime type in which we paid the second highest amount, one significant barrier to victim survivors' ability to flee an abusive situation can be a financial one. We would like to share an example to illustrate some of the types of compensation we can provide to support domestic violence survivors. If someone needs to relocate in the aftermath of a crime, the compensation program can consider payment of a security deposit, limited rental assistance, and a moving truck to transport belongings to a new and safe place to live. Next slide, please. As a resource to victim survivors, the Victim Compensation Program has been part of a collaboration team to improve the center's website and increase accessibility. In addition, victim survivors can access and print a PDF application that's been translated into 12 different languages, 13 including English, from the center's website. Our website also includes information about eligibility, the types of losses we can consider, a link to our online application, and the PDF version of our policies. Our website is shared with victim survivors via our acknowledgement letters, phone conversations, and follow-up emails when a survivor or support person reaches out. Next slide, please. In fiscal year 2024, the Victim Compensation Program reached out to and offered training for allied professionals around the state. Compensation staff, in collaboration with the Restitution Unit, met with the new state's attorneys, victim advocates, and the attendees of the Vermont Victims Assistance Academy. Victims compensation staff also presented at the Vermont Police Academy during their autumn and spring academies. We also showcased to support and offered victims/survivors. Let me start that over. We showcased the support offered to victim survivors and the important role law enforcement plays in getting that information out to victim survivors. Our sexual assault claims specialist had also presented her program training to new sexual assault nurse examiners. Compensation staff are aware of how important outreach is, and we are committed to growth. As we develop our team, we have plans to continue to expand opportunities for outreach to allied professionals and others who support victim survivors. In addition, we will continue presenting to each new class at the Academy to ensure that all new officers in Vermont are aware of the resources available to victim survivor and their vital role in sharing that information. Next slide. The sexual assault program is also under the umbrella of the Victim Compensation Program, of the Compensation Program. Victims of sexual assault are eligible if the crime has occurred in Vermont. The survivor does not need to report the crime to law enforcement in order to receive services, and the victim survivor usually presents for medical care at an emergency department, but can also report to other settings such as Planned Parenthood, student health centers to receive those same services. The sexual assault program offers victim survivors access to trained sexual assault nurse examiners, also known as SANEs, at hospitals in Vermont. These specially trained nurses provide the option for a forensic medical exam to victim survivors. They also receive access to testing and treatment for sexually transmitted infections, treatment of injuries, certain follow-up care related to the sexual assault, HIV infection prevention medication, and up to 20 sessions of mental health counseling with a licensed provider of their choice. The sexual assault program of the Vermont Center for Crime Victim Services considers payment of all out-of-pocket medical expenses related to a sexual assault after the victim survivor's health insurance has been billed. Because insurance is required to be billed, there are specific procedures put in place to protect a victim's confidentiality and safety. The program also covers eligible sexual assault charges when a victim is uninsured or has an out-of-state insurance policy. In state fiscal year 2024, the sexual assault program had received 219 new claims and again had dispersed $86,774.92 on behalf of victim survivors. Now we'll pass it over to Michelle Pelletier from the Restitution Unit.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michelle Pelletier. As Maria mentioned, I'm the manager for the Restitution Unit. The Restitution Unit began operations on July 1st of 2004, making fiscal year 2024 the 20th year of operation. The unit is responsible for collecting, dispersing, enforcing, and verifying court-ordered restitution. Vermont remains the only state in the country that has a capitalized fund that allows the state to advance payment of restitution to eligible individual victims of crime. While not all losses are eligible for an advance payment from the fund, those losses are paid to the victim as the unit collects from the offender. This includes crime-related losses for cash, jewelry, precious metals, undocumented losses, as well as losses to businesses and government agencies. The unit receives some of its funding from a 15% surcharge on court fines and fees and traffic tickets, as well as money our staff collect from offenders. The unit is currently made up of 7 staff, myself, the RU manager, 2 victim liaisons, and 4 collection case managers. I just want to give a shout out to Maggie Lane. She has been a collection case manager here for 14 years, and on November 1st, she will be retiring. We have really appreciated having Maggie here. She brings great passion and dedication to the work, and her dedication and just love for the work she does will be missed after her retirement. So thank you so much, Maggie. Next slide, please. Last fiscal year, the Restitution Unit received a total of 1,076 new restitution judgment orders statewide from the courts, with a total of about $2 million being ordered in restitution on behalf of crime victims in Vermont. Of those orders, 355 were for individual victims and 721 were for business victims, which means about a 67/33% split. So as you can see from those numbers, Definitely a majority of the orders we received this last fiscal year were for businesses. This represents a roughly 50% increase over last year's orders when we received 719 new orders from the court. In fiscal year 2024, we noticed an increase of restitution judgment orders for retail theft cases. Overall, we saw a large increase in restitution orders from Chittenden, Lamoille, and Rutland, with an overall slight decrease in cases from Washington, Windham, and Windsor. Next slide, please. During fiscal year 2024, the restitution unit sent out about 3,300 payments to crime victims, totaling about $1 million. Of that, the restitution was able to advance $241,000 from the restitution fund, and the remaining $762,000 was paid to victims as we collected from the offenders. All payments sent to victims are processed by our 2 victim liaisons that work with victims to document their loss, determine eligibility for an advance payment from the restitution fund, and provide victims an update on their restitution. Next slide, please. In fiscal year 24, the 4 collection case managers made a total of 27,890 outbound calls and text messages on the behalf of crime victims. Their efforts brought in $948,000 for crime victims in Vermont. Collection case managers are responsible for holding offenders accountable while also making victims whole financially. The relationship the collection case managers build with those on their caseload is an important one. While their primary job is to collect restitution from the offenders, they do so much more. Case managers often walk someone through how to purchase a money order, give them information on who to call about court fines and fees or traffic tickets. They give them leads on jobs and provide them with information about programs to help them get their license back. Next slide, please. As Maria mentioned, Comp and Restitution paired up to provide trainings to agency partners last year, such as the Victim Advocates and the Victim Academy. But one unique relationship that the unit has is with the court diversion programs. Through our continued work and collaboration with diversion, we continue to adopt our MOU with diversion to better serve participants and harmed parties. We continue to see an increase in cases where the restitution unit and diversion can collaborate to ensure both the needs of the harmed parties and participants are being met. This allows the harmed parties to receive their restitution in a timely manner, as well as allows the participants to be released from diversion and continue to pay their restitution through our office. In addition, we are proud to say that we have an overall collection rate of 49%. This shows the dedication our staff have to ensure victims are made whole financially and offenders are being held accountable for their outstanding restitution, and to ensure that they can do what they can to move beyond the crimes they've committed. Finally, we're excited to see the amount that we're able to advance to crime victims be increased by 59% over last year. This ensures that crime victims are receiving the restitution in a timely manner. Now I will hand it over to Carol Brochu, Director of Finance and Administration.
Thank you, Michelle, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carol Brochu. I am the Director of Finance. I would like to take this opportunity to provide you with a brief overview of how the Center for Crime Victim Services is funded and how those funds are distributed to programs and service organizations throughout Vermont that help support victims and survivors of crime. CCVS is mandated to administer the Victim Compensation Program, the Vermont Restitution Unit, and the Victim Assistance Program, and to administer the Federal Victims of Crime Act, VOCA funds, along with several other federal grants. CCVS receives both federal and state funds to support numerous victim survivor services throughout Vermont. During this presentation, you'll hear more about those services and the work that CCVS does to help victims of crime. Next slide, please. Now I would like to try to explain how CCVS is funded with both federal and state dollars. In this slide, we show that CCVS has 3 special funds, each relying on traffic tickets, court fines and fees, and marriage license. Federal funds, whoops, excuse me. Federal funds in state fiscal year 2024 provided nearly 6.6 million grants to victims service programs. During this presentation, you'll learn more about the federal grants that CCVS receives and the dependency on federal funds to continue to provide victim services throughout Vermont. The largest federal award that CCVS receives is the Victim of Crime Assistance, VOCA award. CCVS relies on VOCA funds to provide numerous victim services throughout Vermont. Next slide, please. The largest federal award that CCVS receives is the VOCA. VOCA award has seen decreases over the past few years, and many other states have had to cut victim service programming. In state fiscal year 24, CCVS managed to level fund programs. However, in state fiscal year 26, we will be receiving $1.2 million less than the VOCA award that was received in state fiscal year 24. CCVS will be challenged with looking for additional funding to support the loss of VOCA funds and to avoid having to cut victim survivor service programs. CCVS receives administrative funds to support grant administrative staff needed to meet the federal requirements of each federal grant award, generally between 5 and 10% of the grant award. When federal grants go up and down, so does the amounts that CCVS receives to support these positions. As you can see, the budget for state fiscal year 24 was $11,575,667. The funding sources that you see below are the DVSV fund, the general fund, compensation fund, restitution fund, and the federal funds that are used to support victim services throughout Vermont. Reductions in federal funding and revenues into the special funds have had a direct impact on whether CCVS can continue to fund victim service programs at their current levels. Most of these programs have not seen increases in their funding over a decade, creating the many challenges to include maintaining the current level of staffing needed to meet the increased demand for services. Hopefully, I was able to briefly explain the different types of funding CCVS receives and how each of those funding sources support victim services throughout the state of Vermont. Now I will turn it over to Jean Nelson, our Senior Grants Manager, who will talk about CCVS grant programs.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jean Nelson. I'm the grants manager here at the center, and I'm going to be overlapping a little bit. Carol and I work very, very closely together. We have we're tremendously honored to be administrators and entrusted with state and federal funding, and also tremendously honored to work with the 60 organizations that we fund to help victims all over the state. Every single county in our state receives victim service funding from the 15 different state and federal grant programs. And as I said, about 60 separate organizations in Vermont. And these folks employ frontline personnel who assist tens of thousands of crime victims every single year. Next slide, please. So the basically, we receive funding from, this is just an overview, I'm not going to get into it too deep, but we receive funding from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the United States Department of Justice, and the state of Vermont. And each of these funding sources comes with specific goals and rules to support crime victims. And in the next few slides, I'll just highlight some of the programs and the work that's made possible with this funding, starting with the VOCA grant. On the next slide, please. So as you can see, as Carol mentioned, this has been a wild ride, and it's the Victims of Crime Act. It's our largest and most volatile grant. It currently supports 45 programs in Vermont, pretty much all the types of programs that were mentioned 2 slides ago: domestic and sexual violence programs, advocates for marginalized populations like LGBTQ, immigrants, refugees, children, people with disabilities, and we have a group of legal services for crime victims, child advocacy centers, human trafficking case managers, restorative justice programs. And we are so grateful that the state of Vermont picked up the cost of the victim assistance program that used to be housed, that's housed in the state's attorney's offices and was funded with VOCA. And those victim advocates continue to work with individuals, helping them understand their rights. Without the support of the state, we would not have been able to stabilize these other programs. And the administration of the VOCA grant and other programs is one of the statutory responsibilities of the center, as mentioned earlier. In the next few slides, I'll share some examples of how these funds are used from VOCA. So you can go to the next slide. For example, the VOCA grant tracks 28 different types of victimizations, and so we get the data every year, and the VOCA grant is supporting about 12,000 different victims every year. And about 50% of the calls for service involve domestic violence, followed by 9% child sexual abuse, where 1,800 cases were assisted, 8% with adult sexual assault, 1,600 cases were assisted. Other frequent crimes that require assistance include stalking, child physical abuse, neglect, adult assaults, robberies, identity theft, and vehicular crimes. VOCA-funded professionals help by providing information about the criminal justice system, about their rights and needs, referrals to other organizations, help obtaining public assistance, legal services, and highlighted on this slide, accompaniment to sexual assault exams. All the Vermont Network programs receive VOCA grants, and they help to support the advocates who are there 24/7 to assist individuals in crisis. And the Vermont Network receives a grant from VOCA to support the forensic nursing program, which provides a network of credentialed forensic nurses based in hospitals and medical clinics in the state of Vermont. Okay, the next slide. Another example, is restorative justice programming. Since 2002, the center supported the parallel justice program at the Burlington Community Justice Center. That model is based on a framework that, in addition to holding people that commit crimes accountable, we have an equally important responsibility to repair the harm that's created. The programs that CCVS is supporting are hoping to elevate the need to offer a separate set of long-term responses for victims. These could be immediate response, practical assistance, safety and long-term assistance. In 2018, because of the unprecedented increase that we had in VOCA, we were able to create the Voice and Choice Demonstration Project with the following desired outcomes: to sustainably increase Vermont's capacity to serve people affected by crime at the community level, to better identify and address victims' self-defined needs, and to increase opportunities for meaningful and voluntary victim involvement in restorative and parallel processes, and to increase victim satisfaction and their faith in their communities. So the 5 programs that we're supporting with the Voice and Choice Project, plus the Community Justice Center in Burlington, assisted 1,400 individuals last year. Next slide. So one of the programs that we were also able to create was the Legal Partnership for Crime Victims. And we brought these fabulous organizations together who have been working in a spirit of camaraderie since 2018. We direct about $650,000 a year to legal services through the VOCA grant. And this coincides, there was both state as well as federal goals and strategic planning that said that every state will attempt to establish wraparound legal networks that will help ensure that crime victims' rights are enforced and that victims of crime receive a broad range of legal services needed to help rebuild their lives in the aftermath of a crime. And it's a quote that I like to use when I talk about the importance of these attorneys that are there to help crime victims, is that this to me, is the next evolution of the criminal justice system, as has been underscored earlier in this conversation. And it was a rumble stock. It was a podcast, and it was a bunch of victim advocates, both state and community-based advocates. And the beginning says that the criminal justice system is not designed to answer to the needs of crime victims who, through no fault of their own, are thrown into this system. It's designed to figure out if there's enough evidence to bring a case. And if there is, then a defense attorney builds a case for the defendant and a prosecutor builds a case for the state. And then the victim becomes a witness in their own story. They may have felt the impact of the crime, but they play no direct role in how the crime is adjudicated. And for most people who are brand new to the criminal justice system, this comes as a shock. These organizations helped about 1,600 crime victims just last year. Next slide. So one of the grants that supports domestic violence programs at the Vermont Network is the FIPSA grant. The FIPSA is another congressional act. It's under the Agency of Human Services. It stands for Family Violence Prevention Services Act. And these are their numbers, annual numbers, is that they helped about 1,100 people in shelter last year and 7,200 people with non-shelter services. Also, all the DV programs do a ton of community education through schools as well as community organizations. And this is and they help shelter children and people who are being exposed to violence in their home and interpersonal relationships. An example is a case as a survivor had been strangled several times by her intimate partner. The level of danger was so severe that she felt unsafe reporting the violence to the local police for fear that he would escalate further and come after her. With support and FIPSA-funded advocacy, the program was able to utilize her familiarity with the patterns to come up with a safety plan that could work, which included safe shelter. And with that in place, she reported the recent violence to the authorities, applied for and was granted a release from abuse order, and then ultimately successfully relocated to another state, hopefully with the help of our victim assist, our compensation program. Next slide. So we also support the Vermont Children's Alliance, which is a nonprofit network of children's advocacy centers, all of which are committed to working together to improve the way Vermont supports and responds to victims of child abuse and sexual abuse. Programs employ evidence-based model that for responding to these very sensitive crimes and require strict accreditation standards. And it should be noted that 29% of the clients assisted are above the age of 18, and many of this model is an interdisciplinary model where people from law enforcement, DCF, prosecutor's office, medical professionals, mental health professionals, victim advocacy at the DV programs, SV programs, come together to assist and try to capture the testimony of the victims on recordings so that they don't have to repeat their stories over and over again, which is not a very trauma-informed way to, especially with children. So that's one of the programs that we're supporting. And it's next slide, please. We are having a lot of challenges with the supervised visitation programs that are a little bit too deep to go into in this conversation, but basically we support supervised visitation programs with about $154,000 in compensation funds and $138,000 in general funds. And then we work with DCF, who has a federal grant called the Access and Visitation Grant. So together, we're giving all these programs about $40,000 each. We have serious challenges in recruiting in Lamoille, Washington, Orange, and Windsor. And the data that we've collected indicates that they were able to offer up 557 supervised visitations last year. 61% of which are court ordered, 29% are referred by DCF, 8% by self, and 1% by network programs. And we need to have a concerted interagency conversations going forward to include the voice of children, domestic violence victims, and safety of the providers and the courts. We must conduct this in the next year and planning that addresses the problems we're having with this programming. Can I have the next slide, please? This is the STOP grant, which is under the Office on Violence Against Women. It's a program that is promotes interdisciplinary collaboration between law enforcement advocacy, the courts, and prosecution. It's a formula grant that requires that we give out specific amounts of that $864,000. And we're required to submit a pretty robust implementation plan to the federal government every 4 years. And we're going to be ramping up our conversations and focus groups and gathering scholarly articles and information for our next plan, which is due in 2026. In this particular grant program this past year, and this grant has been level funded, like Carol said, for the last 10 years. And so we really realize that level funding, given inflation, is not level at all. We know that. And then they continue to layer on more requirements in the funding anyway. But one of them this past year is a requirement from the that we have a victim-centered approach for prosecution that encourages practices that do not compel victim testimony. That requires that the first year you do a training, the second year you create policies, and the third year you prove that you are making sure that all of these other alternative forms of prosecution are exhausted. So we had a great training at the prosecutors training back in June where Kate Cerulli came in, and she did a fabulous very inspiring training on when where science and practice meet when we're working with victims of trauma. And I think that was quite encouraging for the prosecutors who were there. Next, okay, Nancy, thank you. I see you. I totally, yes. We look forward to the continued conversations on supervised visitation. Sexual assault services programming is another program that is also under the Department of Justice Office on Violence Against Women. That has seen slight upticks this past year. We did have an additional $229,000 in funding, and we were able to issue a so we are supporting all the Vermont network programs with it, and we're also giving added grants through the RFP process to the Association of Africans Living in Vermont and the safety team. And okay, next slide. I don't want to take up too much more time. Just wanted to mention, Carol and I received a grant back in 2016 from the Department of Justice to build a grants management system that theoretically was going to help make our lives easier. And when it works, it's great. And we've been working on it, and it's doing it is able to allegedly handle, it does handle our programming from application to close out. We have some growing pains, but apparently it's being used as the model and the enterprise system for the rest of the state of Vermont. So we will be having other state agencies help us to perfect it as we go forward. Next slide. And last but not least, I just wanted to mention that at the last National Vocal Conference, we had a couple of the folks who have been supportive with the center, these stars at the Vocal Conference. Mark Wenberg, who facilitated the work of the St. Joseph's Orphanage, Restorative Inquiry, inspired victim service professionals from all over the country at the National Conference in New Orleans. On the creative and thoughtful processes of documenting the voices of those most impacted with their experiences and stories. And then Anna Nassett, who wrote the book Now I Speak, who we all have, everybody here at the center has read and recommends. It is riveting. She was a moderator at the training. She moderated a panel of stalking victims to highlight the insidious nature of stalking and the ways we can do better to serve. We were proud of both of them, and they are pictured here with Chris Rose, who's the director of the Office for Victims of Crime in DC. Next up, training director, Amber King.
Thank you, Jean. Yes, my name is Amber King, and like she said, I'm the training director here at the center. And first, I just want to start off and tell folks a little bit about our academy, the Vermont Victim Assistance Academy. The Academy is a 4-part foundation level course on victims' rights, services, experience of crime and its aftermath, and much more. I firmly believe that one of the biggest strengths of the Academy is that it brings all these different people together from all across the state. They're all working in different agencies. They all have different levels of experience. And not only are they learning from the sessions themselves, but they're also learning quite a bit from each other. This last Academy session brought in over 30 victim advocates, and they were taught by over 27 different subject matter experts. And we were also honored to learn with 5 victims and survivors who also presented at the Academy and helped me design some trainings. We are currently finalizing the dates for the next session of the Academy, but as soon as those are firmed up, they will be publicized on our website, and I will be sending out an email. If you are subscribed to us, you'll be seeing it on there. Next, I want to talk about National Crime Victims' Rights Week in 2024. Each year, we honor and recognize victims, survivors, organizations, advocates, and other professionals throughout Vermont. This year, the event was held on Friday, April 26th in Stowe at Trapp Family Lodge, and this event brought in nearly 150 attendees in 2024. The national theme for this year was Options, Services, and Hope for Crime Survivors. How could you help? We saw this theme as a call to everyone to be empowered to support victims and survivors in their own communities. To uplift this year's theme, we were honored to have Dr. Christine de Blasio of the safety team as the workshop facilitator as she shared about fostering resilience through empowered healing. The safety team is a Vermont-based nonprofit whose mission is to prevent violence, foster resilience, heal trauma, and build safer communities. This year's National Crime Victims' Rights Week also offered a community listening forum on April 24th in South Burlington, which we co-hosted with the Burlington and South Burlington Community Justice Centers. And I'm so thankful for the passion, knowledge, and commitment that both of these organizations brought to planning this wonderful event, and we truly could not have done it without them. The purpose of the listening forum was to amplify and empower victim survivor voices while also engaging and building connection with communities. This event featured the stories of 2 Vermont survivors and was moderated by Anna Nassett, the owner of Stand Up Resources and a survivor herself. We're hoping to not only continue the listening forum next year in 2025 at National Crime Victims' Rights Week, but also to do a few different locations. So geographically, it's more spread throughout Vermont. Next, I'm going to talk about the National Crime Victims' Rights Week Crime Victim Service Awards. In honor of this event every year, the award ceremony is hosted by the Center and the United States Attorney's Office for the District of Vermont to recognize individuals who have made a difference for victims, survivors of crime, or within the victim services field. The award categories in 2024 included Survivor Activist, Ally, Outstanding Advocacy, Justice for All, and Career Achievement. We also had one additional award based on this year's National Crime Victims' Rights Week theme, the Community Engagement Award. This year, we were honored to have 8 amazing individuals and 1 dog receive these awards. Pictured here is the co-winner of the Justice for All Award, Mojo. Mojo is an electronic storage device detection dog that works with the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force Commander Matthew Raymond. And Commander Matthew Raymond was also the co-recipient of the Justice for All Award with Mojo. As you can see, this is the only photo I managed to take this year for very biased reasons, so I had to share it with everyone else. He's very cute. Next, I'm going to talk about the advisory group. The mission of the advisory group at the center is to join with the center to provide guidance on systematic changes that will benefit other crime victims, contribute to the prevention of crime and violence, and to advance in the healing journey of survivors. This guidance includes feedback to victim-centered programs, training events, public outreach and education, and legislative advocacy efforts. We believe that victims and survivors have a critical role to play in Vermont's response to violence and victimization. Therefore, their guidance, knowledge, and experience should be at the center of our work in victim services. And June of 2024 actually marked 1 year of this amazing group working together. And in the first 16 months, they have been very busy working on a lot of different things. And I'm just so thrilled to know and work with each one of them. Please reach out to me if you would like to learn more about how your agency can also work with them and learn from them. Lastly, I want to talk a little bit about our social media and outreach, starting with the podcast, The Mend. The Mend is a podcast for survivors and victims of crime. Anna Nassett, owner of Stand Up Resources, and whom we have mentioned several times, is our amazing host. We believe that by acknowledging the healing process and providing resources, not only in our state of Vermont, but throughout the country, we can support those who have suffered trauma. This podcast guides listeners through the journey as they begin to mend. You can find all of our old and newer episodes on our website, and you can watch those on YouTube, and you can also listen to them on iTunes. And I also wanted to remind everyone that we are active on several different social media accounts, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and X, also formerly known as Twitter. So be sure to give us a follow if you haven't already. We post events and updates from the center on there, but we also try to post updates from other organizations throughout the state whenever we see those, along with training opportunities. So now I'm going to turn it back over to our Executive Director, Jen.
Hello again. I'll be brief because I want to leave time for question and answers. I pulled 3 highlights out of legislative session, although the center was involved in 20 different bills, and I'm fortunate to see that I have representatives that I get to work with in terms of folks from the network, and also I see that the state's attorney victim advocate. So, there's a lot of pieces to respond to. So I pulled 3 in particular that I wanted to highlight. The first, and I think that my staff is done hearing about this one, but for me, it was a 15-year journey, which was to achieve additional protections in our rules of evidence, specifically with respect to depositions and hearsay exceptions for children who've been victims of serious physical abuse. The legislature did get this over the finish line this year. So currently, children who have been the victims of sexual abuse are protected from depositions as of right. And also their statements are allowed their hearsay statements are allowed in to a proceeding if they're made to, for example, a teacher. So many children disclose to a teacher or even a parent. Other ways that we can prevent children from having to testify, but those protections were not extended to children who were victims of serious physical abuse. So the legislature did make that change, and I'm happy to report that they are going to go further this year to make sure that the hearsay exceptions, which currently are only applying to children under 12, wherein the deposition the deposition protections apply to children who are under 16 will mirror each other. So they're looking to increase those protections this year. A lot of that is based on the neuroscience in terms of how children's brains develop, and there's a lot of energy to bring that forward. I do want to speak to some of what Kelly had referenced. For many advocates there who've done this work, the frustration in terms of what happens if cases go the mental health route, in terms of the fact that it's been described as a black hole for victims and survivors in terms of any rights at all to notification, basic information. I won't belabor the point, but for those of us that work in the criminal justice system, at least there are rights on paper. Whether they happen or not, that's a different conversation. But for mental health proceedings, there's been nothing. So at least this year, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, we were able to make sure that victims would have a right to notification if the person was discharged, committed, eloped. Those are pieces that the victim survivor would get information on. And also that, again, it seems maybe kind of shocking to many people, but they would at least have a right to submit a victim impact statement, either in writing or through a prosecutor. So these may seem like, to some people, to me, wow, this doesn't happen, but it didn't happen. And I thank victim survivors like Kelly, Joanne Cortendick, who has fought for on behalf of her sister, that these are now some basic rights that victims can get. We're still not there, but we're getting there. Finally, what I was most excited about, in a way, is that a conversation about earned time off a sentence and what then became a conversation about learned time off of a sentence. So when somebody's been convicted of a crime, do they get additional rights if they're on parole to earn time? Or does everybody also get access to learn time if you take advantage of a program that would provide you with education, whether it be academic or tech-based? Do you get additional time off? And again, going to shout out to Senator Sears. I went to him and said, we can't do this when we have a victim notification system that doesn't work in the way that you all think it does. So he said, okay, we're going to look at this and we're going to study it. And just this past October 16th, was able to bring in Anna Nassett and Kelsey Rice, two members of our advisory council, who basically stopped the committee conversation. And they said, nope, we are not doing anything else without looking at how we can fix this system. So the conversation that first started back in January, which left me really kind of pulling my hair out in terms of how much more can we move the goalposts on victims and survivors, has really led to an important conversation about how can we invest in a system that is better than what we have in Vermont. So I'm really excited about the ongoing conversation and the ongoing work, again, in terms of pulling together community from folks that, do this work, victim survivors. So that for me is a huge highlight. So I will stop speaking and see if there's, any questions or that anybody has that haven't been put into the chat. And if there are not, I encourage you to go to our website. It's, still a work in progress. We're trying to make it better. But anyone that's looking for any training in terms of restitution, victims' compensation, please let us know. We do those obviously for free and happy to always bring that to the community. Otherwise, always interested in any ideas that folks may have in terms of policy change and how we can be of support with that. But
Jennifer, I'd just love to say thank you so much for inviting me. This is Nancy from DCF.
hi, Nancy.
Such an informative, so many informative presentations today. And, I don't have a solution to offer, but just sort of a comment that it would be great if we could find a way to be talking to each other like year round about legislative initiatives, because I feel like once the session starts, and even like in the month leading up to the beginning of the session, it's like this major scramble. And I just would, I guess I'm just saying this out loud for those of us who have overlapping legislative initiatives to be coordinated so that we know when to show up and offer supportive testimony, or just sort of be prepared for legislation that's being passed.
Thank you. And I did let probably Nancy will be the only one that understands what I'm saying, but I did let VCAB know about like the hearsay pieces and additional protections. But I do agree there needs to be a better way of communicating in advance, because things move so quickly. And, building that community, as I started off with in my conversation, it's like we only have each other because nobody else is speaking on behalf of victim survivors.
Mm-hmm.
And how we can do that better. So I think that's really an important point. Thank you. All right, so nothing else?
Hey, Jen, before we go,
Yep.
could I ask the board members and any staff that need to attend our next meeting to come back on or log back in at 3 o'clock for our next meeting? I know we had scheduled it for later, thinking we would be later in the day, but if possible, I'd like to do it in about 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody who took the time out of their day to attend. Again, we can only do this together. So I want to ask Susan Ide if she's on.
Yes, I am right
She
here.
volunteered to read this last quote.
Thank you, Jen. You're not a victim for sharing your story. You are a survivor, setting the world on fire with your truth. And you never know who needs your light, your warmth, and raging courage. By Alex L.
Thank you, Susan. And thank you, everyone, again. Go enjoy this wonderful last burst we have of nice, comfortable temperatures.